What's going on, everyone? Today I'm going to be ranking all 42 Godzilla and King Kong movies from the worst to the best. I decided I'd do this on a tier list. I don't usually do my rankings in the tier list form. I usually do them just, a regular ranking. But I thought a tier list would be fun because there are so many of these movies. Look at all this. There's a lot here. I am a casual Godzilla viewer, not really for King Kong. I feel like King Kong I've been more aware of for a longer period of time, but Godzilla is something I never really got into until recently. I watched the MonsterVerse movies a few years ago. I started catching up with them and I absolutely loved them. Well, obviously we'll talk about those later, but I caught up with those. And then just recently, ever since Godzilla -1 came out, I've been going on a large binge watching through all of the Japanese Godzilla films. Now, let me rephrase that. Technically not all of them. There is a couple of them I had to skip because they were simply not available in my country. I could not find them anywhere. I tried everything. I tried using a VPN. I wasn't able to get them on DVD in time, so I couldn't do it, right? There's a couple I missed out on. King Kong Escapes, was not able to watch that. The Return of Godzilla from 1984, although I did watch the American re-edited version because that was available in my country. Godzilla vs. Bellante, Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, Godzilla vs. Mothra, the one from the 90s, and that's it. Only those 5 movies I was not able to watch. I was able to watch every other movie that includes King Kong or Godzilla. There's also a bunch of other movies with like other monsters in those universes. For example, there's a bunch of Mothra movies. There's a Rodan movie, which I actually did watch the Rodan movie, but I'm not including that in this ranking. And then there's a bunch of others as well with a bunch of other people that are all within that same sort of franchise, same universe, but I did not watch all of those. I didn't have time for all of those, and since they're not technically Godzilla or King Kong movies, we're not including them. Maybe one day we'll do a list with all of those. Maybe we'll watch all of them. It'll be like 80 plus movies at that point. But we are doing this here with all these movies. This is going to be really fun. Let's get into it. So starting off, we are going in chronological order because I thought that would be the easiest way to do this. We are starting with King Kong from 1933. Now, this is actually the oldest movie I've ever watched. I've never watched a film before 1933, and it was actually a movie I watched when I was really young. I just saw it on the TV one day. It was on cable, and I just kind of watched it. Obviously, I was a kid. I didn't really pay attention to it that well, so I did rewatch it more recently, and yeah, it's an A-tier film. It is really solid. Obviously, it's a lot older. You have to kind of keep that in mind when you're watching it, but it really does hold up well today. Like in terms of the stop motion that they do, I'm not exactly sure how they did it, but it's awesome. It looks amazing. It somehow looks weirdly real. And I know it technically is real because it's stop motion. Like they're not doing it digitally or anything like that. But like it almost does, it feels so seamless with all the other characters there, which is weird to see from such an old film, you know what I mean? Like it's not something that you would expect from the majority of films from the 30s, right? And if it's able to hold up almost 90 years later, actually, yes, 91 years later, that's insane. This movie's 91 years old. Even 91 years later, I still feel like this holds up, which is just incredible to think about, that even in 100 years from now, it'll probably still hold up in some way, shape, or form. It's obviously got that classic King Kong story, which I do think was executed better in later movies, but at least in this singular film itself, this is the first time we saw the story. It is really interesting, it is really cool, and I feel like it was really unique for its time. But then they followed it up with the biggest steaming pile of shit I have ever watched, and that is Son of Kong. Okay, it's not that bad. It's not a pile of shit, but it is such a pointless sequel. It came out in the exact same year, 1933, and it felt like such a cash grab, which is insane to think about because I feel like when people use the word cash grab, it's usually for more recent movies. I feel like people don't usually say that movies back then were cash grabs because, back then it's like, movies were first really becoming a big thing, right? Especially in the 30s. But this just feels like they needed to push this out just in order to get more people back in the theaters as soon as possible because the first one I'm assuming was a big hit back in the 30s. But I don't really know what the point of this movie is. Like, it just doesn't really feel like there's a point to watching it. It's a very short film. It's only a little bit over an hour long. And the Son of Kong itself is in the movie for maybe 10 minutes. Most of the movie is just a lot of pointless conversations, a lot of pointless dialogue that doesn't really go anywhere. Some of the characters from the first one return, and they're just uninteresting in this one. So I don't really think there's any point to watching this movie. It doesn't have nearly as many interesting moments as the original does. And obviously the story is just non-existent. So yeah, don't recommend this one. And then we got Godzilla from 1954, the original Godzilla film. This one, to me, it's got to be A tier. It's going even above the original King Kong. This to me is such a well-made film. It is mainly getting the points for the actual story of the movie itself. The themes there were so fantastic. The actual look of Godzilla and like what he does. I mean, obviously there's a lot better things that happen in the later parts in the franchise in terms of what they do with the Godzilla creature itself. But the story is so strong. Obviously, with the atomic bomb and everything that happened with that during World War II, it's a big part of Japan's history. And this movie only came out, what, like 9 years after that happened? So which was crazy to think about. And they had a movie that was talking about that. There's this whole story with this scientist who's trying to create this weapon to get, kill Godzilla. And he has to think about the ethical complications of that due to the fact that this weapon could also be used for terrible things down the line. Obviously, using it against Godzilla makes sense, but what if humans use it for other things? They call it the oxygen destroyer here. And to me, it was a really interesting story. They had a lot of great characters, a lot of great conversations. Everything about that was fantastic. The music was amazing. This is where it all comes from. I had to give it A tier. There's really no other place for this. I know a lot of people probably would give it S tier. It's really close to making that leap, but it's just not quite there yet. Next up, I have Godzilla Raids Again, and this one was a direct sequel to the first Godzilla, but it doesn't feel like it. Like, it feels like a completely new movie, and it does go a little bit more into the goofy direction. This is the first time Godzilla actually takes on another monster, and in this film, I believe it was Angulosaurus or Angularis. I don't remember the exact pronunciation of this creature, but it was kind of funny. Like, the first time I watched it, I was just dying of laughter, just seeing them just going at it. It was very clearly two people in suits just, knocking into each other, knocking over these buildings. And I was entertained by that, relatively. The story itself, though, I just don't think really is that interesting. So I have to put Godzilla Raids Again in D. I don't think it has nearly as many interesting themes as the original. I don't think this, even just the threat of Godzilla himself, I just don't think it's there the same way it is in that original. It doesn't feel like a worthy sequel, at least in my opinion. And next we got Godzilla King of the Monsters, not to be mistaken with the King of the Monsters film from 2019. This is actually Godzilla King of the Monsters from 1956, and it is actually an American re-edit of the original. Now, there's a couple other re-edits they've actually done within the series. We're going to talk about another one a little bit later. There was another one, I think an Italian re-edit or something that I didn't watch because I'm not going to watch every single re-edited version of it because it's not really that different, obviously. But this movie, I'm going to have to give an F tier because it is by far the most pointless movie in this entire franchise. I talked about Son of Kong being a pointless sequel, but this is just a pointless movie altogether because what it is basically, like I said, a re-edit of the original. But they strip away the most important parts of that original film. And I get why it exists. I understand. It's for Americans, right? And obviously back in the 1950s, people were less likely to watch foreign films back then. I know nowadays people are a lot more open to it and they're more likely to watch foreign movies. But in the 50s, yeah, okay, are Americans going to be more likely to be watching movies from Japan? Probably not as often as they would today. So you had this movie that just allowed American audiences to get, introduced to the Godzilla character. And for that, it makes sense. I understand. But the movie just is pointless. It really is. It has some of the scenes from the original, but like I said, takes away the good scenes, and it throws in all these scenes that don't really fit with this new American character, and they don't really flow well. So the movie just kind of feels clunky. It feels like you're just treading through the same thing you already got in the original, but again, without the good stuff. So why even bother watching it? I don't know. Just watch the original. Next up, we have King Kong vs. Godzilla from 1962. I was so excited for this one. And unfortunately, it kind of disappointed. I'm going to put it in C because it's honestly not nearly as good as a lot of people were telling me. It has some good moments. I think the human characters here, and that's like a big thing with the Godzilla movies. You have these stuff with the monsters and you have stuff with the humans, right? And I do think it is important that stuff with the humans is good if it's going to take up a large portion of the film. Obviously, if it's one of those movies, which there's a lot in this franchise that are like that, where like 90% of it's just monsters anyways, then okay, the human stuff doesn't really matter. But if you spend like 70% of your time with human characters, yeah, they better be good human characters. And I don't really feel like this movie provided that. But with the actual Kong and Godzilla fights, they were pretty fun. It was very goofy, very silly. There's one part where Kong shoves a tree in Godzilla's mouth. Like stuff like that's just funny, and it got a kick out of me. But overall, it's not this big exciting thing that a lot of people were telling me it was. It's I'm sure it would have been maybe if I watched it ages ago, but didn't really hit me that much. Up next, I've got Mothra vs. Godzilla from 1964. So this one I was really excited to watch because Mothra, obviously I saw in the American movies from the MonsterVerse, and I thought it was gonna be really cool to see. And honestly, I liked it more than King Kong vs. Godzilla. I really did. So I'm not going to put it in B tier. I'm not going to put it higher, but it was a pretty solid film. Generally speaking, I thought it had much better characters than King Kong vs. Godzilla. But the monster fighting itself, I don't think was that great. Obviously, Mothra as a character, as a monster character, whatever you want to call it, she doesn't have like the best fight sequences just based on what she really is in the movie. And she's not in her full form for a lot of this. So I don't know, it really just didn't deliver in that aspect. Whereas I felt like, the human stuff was at least a little bit better. I love the Mothra fairies, the twin fairies. They are awesome. It's some of my favorite characters in the Godzilla franchise. I love seeing them. I love when they're singing and stuff like that. They're so weird and interesting that like it immediately makes me more interested in the movie just based on them existing alone. It's a really weird thing, but I don't know, I like it. It also has this whole new journalism focus with these movies, which a lot of movies previously focused more on like the soldiers and the government and everything like that. And I liked seeing journalists. I don't know, for some reason that was more interesting to me. Next up, we have Ghidorah, the three-headed monster. This came out the exact same year as Mothra vs. Godzilla. And this was like one of the first ones after watching the original that I really felt like this was a solid movie. Like I was like all on board with it. I'm gonna put it in B tier. Ghidorah, the three-headed monster, doesn't even have Godzilla in the title, but Godzilla is definitely in this movie. And this is the first time where they threw a bunch of monsters in one movie all together. You had Godzilla, you had Ghidorah, you had Mothra, you had Rodan. I think that was it. I don't think there's any more than that, but that was still an insane amount of monsters all in one movie. And there's this really interesting scene where you have Mothra trying to convince Godzilla and Rodan to fight Ghidorah. Ghidorah is the main villain here, that is the main focus, but you have these other characters kind of teaming up to fight against Ghidorah. And like, it's so ridiculous, like for example, that scene, but it's so fun. I fucking love it. And obviously you got the twin fairies returning. You got this whole political assassination subplot. Like there's so much shit going on here, and I think it is just such a damn good time. And if you want a movie from this era of Godzilla, like this is the one to watch. This is solid, batshit crazy all around. And I felt like the monster fights for the first time in the series were actually like really competent. Like they weren't just fun to watch and goofy. I genuinely felt like they were actually just like good. Like they were really solid. So definitely a solid movie. Next up, I have Invasion of the Astro Monster. And I'm going to be honest, I feel like this one deserves a C tier. I was thinking about D, but I feel like it deserves C simply because of the Godzilla dance. That literally just, it deserves it. I'm sorry. It deserves the praise because that was a funny dance. It was even 5 seconds long, but I fucking loved it. This movie though, I don't know. It goes there. It brings Godzilla to space for the first time, which was obviously very crazy. But like, it worked for the most part. I think there's just a few moments that I felt like weren't too great. They have this, whole new thing with these alien characters, and maybe that was a little too far for them to go at this point. Like, I feel like they weren't far enough in this franchise to go that far yet. But it works. It works. Next up, I have Ibra, Horror of the Deep. So a lot of the movies in this little time frame of Godzilla, they don't have Godzilla in the name of the title, but it doesn't matter because Godzilla's in it anyways. This one I'm going to give high D. High D sounds good. It's definitely better than Raids Again, but I don't know. It's an interesting creature. I think this is the first time we've ever seen Ibra. Like I don't recall ever seeing this monster again, but I could be just forgetting, to be honest. But the movie here, I don't like any of the storylines going on here, which is why I'm putting it in D tier. I think the characters themselves, they're just really boring. They have no personality whatsoever, which is unfortunate. But there's a scene with Godzilla and Ibra basically playing volleyball with each other. I'm not even kidding. They're like slapping a giant rock to each other back and forth. It's just like scenes like that just make me go, okay, you know what? This is entertaining. This is kind of funny, but like, it's not that good. Next up, we have Son of Godzilla. I'm going to put this right in between Ibra and Godzilla Raids Again in D tier. Son of Godzilla, I was so excited for it because I was like, what is the Son of Godzilla going to look like? It looks disgusting, bro. This thing is the ugliest creature I've ever seen in my life. No, I'll admit, there are some cute moments there. I do love the end of the movie with Baby Godzilla and Godzilla hugging in the snow. That was a nice scene. It's not technically called Baby Godzilla. I think they call him Manila or something like that. Very odd name. But the creature's just, I don't know, man. It's just, the characters here stunk. The monster action was okay, though, so I'll give it that at least. But like I said, I did like that end moment in the snow, so I could at least give the movie a tiny bit of credit there. Next is Destroy All Monsters. This is an easy B tier for me. This is exactly what the franchise should have done at this point, and I'm glad they did, because at this point, like, same thing with Ghidorah, like bringing a bunch of creatures into one movie together is exactly what you should do. Because I feel like if your movie's not gonna have like that many interesting subplots, that many interesting storylines, at least throw in a bunch of monsters and have them go at it, you know? And the thing is, with some of these other movies, sometimes watching only two creatures fighting each other the whole time can get kind of boring, you know, especially because, you know, they had limited freedom here. You know, they're people in big ass suits. Like, it's hard to manage that, and sometimes it makes it so they're doing the same exact fight sequence every single time, and it gets old quick. But like, you have a movie like Destroy All Monsters, where it's just a bunch of monsters thrown in all at once. I think it's just a lot more entertaining that way. It is easily the best action in the entire series thus far, I would say. So Destroy All Monsters is solid. Next, we have All Monsters Attack. Now, I was assuming this movie was going to be similar in quality to Destroy All Monsters. I thought it was going to be like a sequel to it almost. I was wrong. I was so wrong. This is one of the worst movies I have ever seen in my entire life, and I don't say that lightly. This movie sucks. So essentially what it is a clip show of things that happened in prior Godzilla movies. A lot of the scenes in the movies are just reused from other movies. I don't really understand doing that for a movie. That's kind of weird, but whatever, that's what it was. But like, that's not even the worst part about it, because everything outside of that is just so like, yeah, it's very goofy, but it's not goofy in like a funny way or like an interesting way. It's just like a goofy in like this feels like it's for kids. And like, I mean, sure, you could say Godzilla is, you know, kid friendly, some of them, I guess, not the original, like, you know what I mean? Some of them later on, I could see it being kid friendly, but this one, like, it doesn't feel like it's just kid friendly. It feels like it's actually specifically made for children. Like, you're meant to watch this as an 8-year-old child. You know what I mean? It's just, they have the son of Godzilla is talking in this one with an actual voice. What the fuck are we doing? Like, why are we doing that?
あ、そっか。今どこにいるかな。いつも一緒じゃないの？あんまりそばにいると怒るんだ。
And somehow the son of Godzilla here, whatever his name is again, Manila, I forgot his name, honestly. He looks terrifying in this one. Like, he just looks so, what is that? What is that supposed to be? And the whole clip show aspect of this is literally just because a kid's dreaming about this monster island. I don't know. It's a dumb movie. There's no point of watching it. It just kind of exists. Next up, we have Godzilla vs. Hedorah. Now, I'm going to put this right below King Kong vs. Godzilla into C tier. I actually think there was some cool stuff to this movie. It's probably one of the most stylish and creative movies thus far, which I thought was really interesting. Like, there's this whole sequence, like, almost looks like you're like tripping on acid or something when you're watching it, but it's cool. Like, it has style. There's some good songs in this movie too, so if you like music, there you go. They also have this whole subplot, or I guess it's not even like a subplot, it's kind of the main story about the, you know, damages of the monsters that they have on the environment. Like, and that's a cool angle to go, because a lot of movies I feel like don't really focus on themes like that, but it was a cool theme, and that's basically what Hedorah is. It's like this giant like garbage monster, and it's basically just like, you know, a creation of human waste. I don't know, like garbage and stuff. It's a weird looking monster, but it's kind of cool. The fighting though here was really bad. I felt like it just got so repetitive really quickly. I think it was the first time in this franchise where I felt like I got so bored of the fighting after like a couple minutes, but I think it made up for it with the story, which is really odd, because I feel like it's usually the other way around, where the fighting's good and the story's not good, but this time I felt like the story was better than the fighting was. Next, I have Godzilla vs. Gigan. I'm gonna put this actually right below Hedorah. I feel like it wasn't as good, but it's definitely better than Invasion of the Astro Monster. I feel like this is the most average Godzilla movie. Like, it is so just right down the middle. It pretty much doesn't do anything too wrong, but it doesn't do anything that right either. I like that there's some decent amount of creatures in this one, but I don't know, man. I've started to feel like these movies were getting repetitive at this point, because even just like the sound effects, like I noticed that in this one more than anything, where I was watching it and it's like they reuse the exact same sound effects on all these creatures again and again and again. I know they've done that in the prior ones too, but like for some reason my mind just kind of like switched on this one, and I noticed it more than I ever did before. And I was like, damn, dude, like they gotta do something different, man. I know they've done different things with different creatures and different like settings and stuff, but like you gotta find a different way to make these monsters fight, because I feel like it just wasn't that great here. I do like the Godzilla theme park though. That was kind of cool. So you know, I'll give the movie credit there. Next we got Godzilla vs. Megalon. This one, I feel like is probably gonna get a D tier, but it's definitely better than Son of Godzilla, so I'm gonna leave right there. It's kind of misleading actually when you think about it, because look at the poster. It's got Godzilla and Megalon on a fucking onto the Twin Towers. They never fought on the Twin Towers in this movie. I don't understand that, but the movie itself, it's got Jet Jaguar, so like that was kind of cool. I'm not gonna lie, I like Jet Jaguar. It's probably the goofiest of all the movies thus far up until this point. Maybe not goofier than All Monsters Attack, but it's pretty goofy. And there's some interesting moments. I mean, Godzilla does the flying kick in this one, so if you want to see the flying kick of Godzilla, I mean this is where you get that. So that gave me a chuckle, but yeah, nothing really too spectacular in this one, unfortunately. Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla from 1974. I'm gonna put this at the top of C tier. A lot of movies are gonna be in C tier. Just letting you know right off the bat, you're gonna have a pretty filled C tier in this video. But I liked this movie a lot because I think it's a great way to make Godzilla actually like the villain again, because for a while now, Godzilla wasn't a villain. You know, he was in the original, but I felt like they just kind of made him a hero, which was cool and all, but I wanted to see him a villain again. And he's technically not the villain here, but they found a way to make him the villain by introducing Mechagodzilla. And so in the beginning of the movie, you kind of have Godzilla killing people and you're like, what the hell's going on? Why is he attacking cities and stuff? But then you learn that he actually is a robot underneath the kind of like skin they put on it, made it look like it was Godzilla. And I like that whole subplot because I keep calling them subplots, but a lot of times it is straight up just the main story. Like it's not a subplot if it is the main story. You have these like ape people, like it's weird to say ape people, but that's basically what it is. It's literally people who are like disguised as apes. They're apes disguised as people, I guess, right? But even though it sounds like insane, it somehow works. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the fighting here. I just don't think it doesn't get B tier though. It doesn't get B tier. Now, Terror of Mechagodzilla, I was really excited for, but I'm gonna actually put that in C tier as well. Probably below Mothra vs. Godzilla, but above King Kong vs. Godzilla. It was basically a sequel to Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. I guess technically it was. And it actually was the end of the first series of Godzilla. I guess they call it the Showa era if I'm not mistaken. I'm starting to learn some of those, terms of the Godzilla franchise, and I believe the first era of Godzilla was the Showa era. And yeah, it was the end of Godzilla here, at least for now. And I thought it was a fitting ending. Like I said, I think most of this first era of Godzilla was pretty solid. It's just there's a lot of it that went a little too far for me, and I don't think had good stories or interesting, storylines or interesting characters, or maybe there was something about the action that just felt a little bit off. But there's a couple that were really solid and really did good for me. For example, like Ghidorah and Destroy All Monsters, I thought were some of the best ones there. And of course, the original is obviously going to be at the top of all those, obviously. But next up, we have another King Kong movie. Finally, we can get back to King Kong. There's obviously way more Godzilla movies than King Kong movies. That's just the way it is. But King Kong from 1976. I did watch this when I was a kid as well. Like I said, I was more familiar with King Kong before, but I did rewatch it recently just to remember the movie, because honestly, I kind of forgot it. And I'm glad I did, because I had a very different idea of what the movie was like than what it actually was like. But I actually kind of like it quite a bit. I'm going to put it above Ghidorah. Now, sure, I am a big King Kong fan, probably more so than Godzilla. So, just keep that in mind when you're watching this video. So yeah, I feel like this movie does a lot of things right. It also completely changes what the original did. Like, it's not the same story, which I think is okay. Like, they're not filming a movie. Like, the reasons for them going to the island are very different here. And I don't mind that. I think that works. But then there's other things I don't like. For example, the character of Anne, they changed a lot. I mean, okay, she's a completely different person because her name is different, for example. I think they called her Dwan or something like that, but she was just not that good here. Like, she didn't have any depth. She didn't have any interesting moments. I shouldn't feel like what Anne is supposed to feel like. I did like Jeff Bridges as Jack, though. He was really great. And I also didn't like Kong here. Like, I know I put it pretty high, so it's surprising I'm saying so many negatives about it, but I felt like Kong in this one, like, Kong is supposed to be this character who has like childlike curiosity with things, right? He's just curious. He's like, for example, he's like playing around with the dinosaurs after he kills them, like stuff like that, where he's a child deep down, and that also kind of goes around with his relationship with Anne, where he has this passionate feeling towards her. It's not necessarily like romantic love. I mean, it's not like that. It's more like he just appreciates this human more than he's ever appreciated something in his life before. And it's a beautiful relationship that I really love. And he notices it just based on how Anne treats him. But in this one, Kong doesn't feel like that though. Kong feels like someone who's just angry that this girl doesn't want to sleep with him. Like that's what I'm not even kidding. When Anne runs away, he just looks like he's upset because Anne didn't want to sleep with him. I know her, again, her name's not Anne in this one, but like that's what it just feels like. And it's like, that's not what Kong is supposed to be, you know? But the movie itself is really entertaining. I think a lot of these scenes are well done. I think the look of Kong is great. I think the ending of the movie is great as well. He goes to the Twin Towers. Like all that shit's great. The soundtrack is fantastic. So with that being said, I know I said some bad things about it, but it deserves the B tier. It does. Next up, we got Godzilla 1985. I'm going to put this in C tier below Godzilla vs. Gigan. Now, here's the thing. Godzilla 1985 is the heavily re-edited American version of The Return of Godzilla from 1984, which was one of the movies I was not able to watch because it was not available in my country. I really wanted to watch it. So when I watched this, I did feel like, yeah, I kept telling myself, like, I feel like the original version would have been better. And I'm sure it would have been, but I guess I won't know until I watch it one day. But this did feel odd, just like, you know, the Godzilla King of the Monsters did, where it felt like the American scenes that they kind of forced in there, they didn't really flow well with the rest of the movie. So I just, again, felt like the point here just it didn't make sense. Why does this movie need to exist? Again, because, you know, it was a way for them to introduce the character to the American audiences. I get it, but today, like watching it, I'm just like, this movie seems pointless to me. But because I didn't watch The Return of Godzilla, it's, I think, a bit different. I think if I did watch it, I probably would rank this even lower. But how it was, I did enjoy a lot of the scenes in it regardless. I think it was really amazingly shot. The way Godzilla felt like a terrifying presence here, I thought that was awesome. So I gotta give it some credit, but yeah, it's just one of those movies that I don't know. I don't see the point of its existence. Now we got King Kong Lives from 1986. There weren't a lot of these movies in the 80s, because we're shooting through the 80s pretty fast. I think I'm gonna put this in the bottom of D, probably above Raids Again, though I think I liked it more than Raids Again. King Kong Lives was a sequel to the 1976 King Kong, but it doesn't feel like a sequel because I don't think any of the characters returned as far as I remember. Yeah, I don't remember any of the characters returning. It was a new cast, and its execution was pretty bad. I think there's some good ideas there, though. Like, I genuinely think there's some good ideas, just that the execution is very muddy. There's a lot of filler in this movie, a lot of moments that I just feel like they don't need to exist. Like, I'm like, why is this conversation here? I don't know. Linda Hamilton is in it from the Terminator movies. She's cool. Sarah Connor from Terminator, in case you don't know who Linda Hamilton is. I hope you know who Linda Hamilton is, though. But she's cool here. It's cool to see, you know, an actress that I'm aware of in this movie, but it doesn't make up for the movie itself. It really doesn't. It doesn't have many cool scenes. It doesn't have many cool, you know, monster scenes, even with King Kong himself. You even have the son of Kong here, but again, I don't really find what they did with it to be anything that spectacular. So I'm gonna have to put it in a D. So like I said, there were quite a few Godzilla movies I had to skip, and that was actually within this time period, the late 80s to the early 90s. That's where those ones were. But I was able to watch Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2 from 1993, and then the ones going forward I was able to watch as well. So this one, it was actually technically the third Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla movie, because Mechagodzilla is a Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla movie. It's just not titled Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2, but it is technically that, which would make this technically Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 3. But obviously it's not connected to it, so it really is more of a reboot than anything. But I'm gonna put it in C tier. Like I said, a lot of movies in the C tier. We have all the Mechagodzilla movies in C tier, which it shouldn't be the case because I think Mechagodzilla is a lot cooler than that. But I don't know, man. There's some cool large scale action sequences here, some really awesome fight scenes. The story just doesn't work for me. It doesn't work. It doesn't have enough interesting characters or interesting stories to latch me in like I feel like it should. But one part of this I really do like is that in this one, Mechagodzilla is actually created by humans instead of created by aliens. I think that works a lot better. I think making it be just straight up humans that make it, it makes it add that human elements to the villains here. So it feels just a little bit more meaningful, I guess. But they don't really do much with it beyond that, so I don't know. It's definitely a decent movie, but doesn't do everything that I feel like it should have. And Baby Godzilla's back in this one, but he actually looks like Godzilla's baby. He doesn't look like whatever the fuck that thing was in the Showa era, but I actually like how this Baby Godzilla looks. It's pretty cool. And next we got Godzilla versus Space Godzilla. I'm gonna put this in D tier, probably above Godzilla versus Megalon. It just didn't work for me. I don't know. We have this space version of Godzilla, which was pretty weird to begin with, but I don't know. The fighting felt very stiff in this one, like the monster fighting, and I don't know why that was, but it just was, and it was not pretty to look at. So definitely holds this movie back from being better than it could have been, but oh well, what are you gonna do? Next up is Godzilla versus Destroya or something like that. I don't know how you pronounce it, but this one I was really excited to watch because the monster, the Destroya, on the poster looks terrifying and looks so cool. And in the actual movie itself, he is just as cool as the poster looked. So I'm putting this shit in B tier just for how that motherfucker looks. That's literally all I needed, was just how this thing looks. There are a lot of cool moments in this movie though. I will say that. I do think the characters fall flat. Again, I know. I keep saying that for like all these damn movies. It's unfortunate that is the case. There are a lot of these movies that the characters are great though. Don't get me wrong. But I don't care because Destroya is such a cool looking monster, and I don't know how this thing hasn't returned since. I don't think it has, right? I mean, at least not significantly. So fucking awesome. The creature designs are important to me. They really are. I think it really goes a long way to making the movie better. And this one completely worked for me. Now this next one is where I really lose people, and I need you guys to hear me out, right? I am rating these movies based on how good of movies they are, right? I'm ranking them on how good of a movie they are, not how good of a Godzilla or Kong movie they are. Obviously, I want the movie to be a good Godzilla movie and a good Kong movie as well, but if it's a good movie, it's a good movie. That's all that matters, right? Now, Godzilla 1998, I don't necessarily think this is a good movie, so I'm not putting it high, but I'm not putting it in last place either. I'm not putting it in F tier. I'm also not putting it in D tier. But I will be putting it in C tier, probably at this top of C tier. Now, I know why people hate this one. I know, obviously. It's, the American version of Godzilla, and it's completely butchers what Godzilla is. And especially if you're just talking about the actual design of it, the creature itself, yeah, it's terrible. The CGI on it's terrible. It doesn't look like Godzilla. It literally looks like a dinosaur. I'm assuming they were trying to take after the hype of the Jurassic Park movies, and they're trying to make it look more like a T-Rex. And they probably wanted to separate it as much as they can from the Japanese films just to kind of make it their own thing. But at that point, why even call it Godzilla? You know what I mean? But I'm not going to say the movie's bad just because of that, And I know people have other problems with it as well, but I really don't have significant problems with other parts of this movie. I think the story is fine. It feels like any other Roland Emmerich film where it's basically a disaster movie, and there's just a lot of crazy shit going on, and you have a lot of characters that are trying to deal with it and try to figure things out, and it has some snarky dialogue, some interesting scenes there. I enjoyed it. I was entertained by the movie. I liked some of the characters, so I can't give it a bad score just because it's a disgrace to the look of Godzilla, but the actual movie itself, it's perfectly fine. If you change the name to something else, I feel like people wouldn't hate on it as much. If that's the case, I'm not going to rate it that low. But I'm also not going to rate that high either. Next, we got Godzilla 2000 Millennium, I believe was the title of this one. I'm going to put this in C tier. Again, a lot of C tiers, I know. But this one just had way too much shit going on. I feel like it was almost hard to keep up with what the hell was happening. And I do really like the last 20 minutes, though. The last 20 minutes is so good, which is what keeps it from being lower, but I think the rest of it to me just didn't work for me. And like I said, just too many different stories going on, too many different things happening that I think kind of kept away from its, pacing. You could have a pacing that's too rushed, you could have a pacing that's too slow as well, but I think this one just kind of has the problem of there's just too much shit going on. Next we have Godzilla versus Megasaurus, I don't fucking know. The one that came out in the year 2000. This one, just like a lot of the other Godzilla movies, fun to watch, bland story, bland characters. I'm not trying to be a Godzilla hater, but that's just how some of them are. And so I feel like I can't put it that high. I'm probably going to put it in C tier as well, right below Godzilla 1985. Megalosaurus, whatever the hell you pronounce it, I don't think it was that good of a creature, but there are some really cool things in this movie. For example, the soundtrack, I think, is one of the best soundtracks in Godzilla movies ever. So, and soundtracks are important to me. So if you're gonna have a good soundtrack, you're gonna get points. You can move up a whole tier just because of its soundtrack. You can. So yeah, that has to be recognized here. But if you want to hear me start praising some of these movies, let's get to the next one. We have Godzilla, Mothra, and King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All Out Attack. Yeah, that's the full title of the movie. It's a long-ass title. This movie's pretty freaking awesome, all right? It's got so much shit going on. I mean, the title itself just implies that there's going to be a lot happening, but it's able to handle all of that, though. It doesn't feel overwhelming. It just feels fucking insanely cool. And this movie actually has Godzilla as the villain, which again doesn't usually happen, and you have King Ghidorah as a hero, which is not something you'd expect. So it feels fresh, it feels new, it feels different, and it has a lot of the newer effects that they're able to do because it came out in 2001, so you're able to have some newer stuff, and everything I think looks a lot better in this movie. And there's some fight scenes that are genuinely some of the best stuff this franchise has ever had. So yeah, GMK, which is I guess is the what people call this, just, kind of shortens the long ass title, but it's great. Now call me crazy for this all you want. Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. I'm gonna be putting this at the top of B. I'm doing it. This is the 4th Mechagodzilla movie, but it is by far the best of all of the Mechagodzilla films, or well, so far, because there's actually one later on that I think is better. But out of all the ones that have a big focus on Mechagodzilla, at least it's one of the best. It is so great. It ties a lot into the original film. It actually works as a direct sequel to it, which is really cool. And the actual story here has a lot more purpose to it than a lot of the other storylines in this franchise. So I really enjoyed this one. I think the actual look of Mechagodzilla here was fantastic. And like I said, the fight scenes, it's a lot newer. You're able to do a lot more with it. I felt like there was more freedom there. It looked great. I was really enjoying my time with this thing. And then we have Godzilla Tokyo SOS, which honestly, these few Godzilla movies that came out in a row, I started to really like. They were some of my favorites. And I'm not going to put this above GMK, but it's above Ghidorah. It is above that. I think this movie, again, brings back it actually works as a direct sequel to Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, and you do have a lot of interesting themes, especially around the ethics of Mechagodzilla itself. And so I would say this is also one of the better ones that includes Mechagodzilla as one of the main components of the movie. But then finishing out this era of Godzilla, we have Godzilla Final Wars, which I was so excited to watch because I heard this was kind of like Destroy All Monsters in the way that it brings a bunch of monsters together all in one movie and just has a big all-out brawl. That's exactly what this movie is, bro. It is an A-tier movie. Fucking loved watching this. It was easily the most batshit crazy of all these movies. It was easily the most insane, but it works. It works on almost every level. So yeah, I gotta give them all the credit here. There are so many insane moments here, and even when you don't talk about the monster stuff, the rest of the movie is basically The Matrix. Like the way the action scenes are filmed, or the way the characters act, it does feel like The Matrix. But who cares? It's awesome. It's fun to watch. It's cool. The story is semi-interesting, but it's also just insanely cool. There's a bunch of monsters attacking a bunch of cities all around the world. They even brought the goddamn Godzilla, which they call Zilla, from freaking the American movie, the 1998 one, the Roland Emmerich one. They literally bring that thing in here, and Godzilla smacks the shit out of it and kills it like right away. It's such a cool thing that happens. I don't know, stuff like that's just like this is like a love letter to Godzilla fans, this one. And ladies and gentlemen, we have finally arrived at an S tier, King Kong from 2005. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. I'm not even kidding. It is in my top 10 favorite movies of all time. I've watched it so many times ever since I was a kid. This is the movie that got me interested in the character of King Kong, which eventually got me interested in Godzilla. So you gotta thank this movie for it. But I used to play the video game as well. It was on the old original Xbox, and I loved it. But this movie, man, it was just so fantastic. So Peter Jackson is one of my favorite directors. Obviously, he directed the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and he is so great at just directing these really large scale sequences. And this movie has a bunch of that, a bunch of awesome looking dinosaurs. The CGI looks incredible too, especially for 2005. Like, sure, maybe it's a little dated now, but it still looks fantastic to me. I really can't get enough of it. And it perfectly remakes the original. Like, this is a remake that's worthy, of existing. A lot of people say remakes sometimes they don't need to exist and stuff like that, but this did need to happen because the 1933 King Kong, yeah, there wasn't as much they could do with it back then. And the one that came out in 76, I mean, they didn't really do much beyond what the original did, if we're going to be honest, which is why I ranked it lower. but I feel like this just was able to do exactly what the original tried, but a million times more expanded. It expands on the characters, it expands on the scale, it expands on the creatures, it expands on literally everything you can think about, and just makes it way better. Because the movie's 3 hours long, you're able to really establish a connection between Anne and Kong, which makes for such a beautiful, I mean, there's a whole sequence in New York City when they're ice skating that is one of the most beautiful moments in any movie I've ever seen. And then obviously the Empire State Building showdown at the end is so fucking good. But even just going back to the stuff on the island, like just some of the scenes with the T-Rex and the fight scenes, and then, you know, the crew getting attacked by all these different creatures on the island, like it is so goddamn good. I can't see why anyone wouldn't love this movie, to be honest. I feel like it has everything a movie lover would love. I know a lot of people say the first hour is a bit slow, but I personally don't feel that way. I feel like if you genuinely are interested in the characters, interested in the story, then you should probably be interested in those moments. But I can understand if you're just there for the action, you're probably not gonna like the first hour. But once the first hour does hit and, you know, King Kong's introduced and everything like that, that's when everything just becomes batshit crazy. And I feel like you need that story build up in the first hour to make that stuff way more impactful and emotional, and just, you know, it's what makes it one of the best movies of all time for me. Just the secrets they uncover on the island and how it's slowly revealed to you. It's a beautiful movie. It's amazing. If you haven't seen any of these movies in the Godzilla and King Kong universe, this is the one you should watch more than anything. And I'm about to hit y'all with another S tier, Godzilla from 2014. This movie deserves the S tier, man. I always hear people complaining about it, saying, oh, well, the human characters stink. No, they don't. What are you talking about? They're great. Aaron Taylor Johnson, Elizabeth Olsen, Bryan Cranston. I know he, you know, what happens, you know, I understand. I'm not gonna try to spoil it for people, but I don't really give a shit, man. He was great from when he was in the movie, and every other character I think is pretty solid. And the actual terrifying nature of Godzilla here is, to me, what makes this movie so incredible, because the way Gareth Edwards is able to shoot this movie is what makes the Godzilla feel larger than life. And he's felt that in the original. I feel like he hasn't felt like that since, though. I feel like most of the other movies, they kind of just treat him as more of an action hero, which is fine. But the original Godzilla, and then of course Godzilla 2014, there's maybe one or two other ones here that do it as well. But I really love when this character is treated like this just terrifying force of nature. And that happens so well in this movie. He is fully treated like that. The scale is amazing. The threat is amazing. The stakes are amazing. The effects are amazing. The soundtrack's amazing. It's an amazing movie. I don't understand the complaints for it. Yes, there's not as much monster fighting as maybe, you know, we get in some other movies, but I feel like you didn't need it in this one. You just didn't. And this completely was the revival of Godzilla for American audiences, because I feel like before this, American audiences, either they were interested in the Japanese films or they didn't really have much to watch, because the Godzilla 1998 one, just like I said, wasn't really Godzilla. So I think this movie definitely did an impact on the character of Godzilla in terms of the perception that American audiences have on it. Some people might say it's not a good thing. Some people say it's a good thing. It really just depends on your taste and what you think. But I think it is a good thing. I think they've made a really cool monsterverse out of it. They've now had 5 movies in it, plus a TV series. So yeah, they're doing good. They're doing good stuff, in my opinion. Next up, we have Shin Godzilla. So we have another Japanese one, I believe. I'm not sure if it's also by the same company as the last ones, but they wanted to bring out another one. It's been since 2004, so it was a whole 12-year gap before they brought out another one. I'm not sure if they decided to do this because of the reception to Godzilla 2014. Perhaps it had something to do with that. I have no idea. But Shin Godzilla is really cool. I'm going to put it in A tier. I did just react to it on my channel just a little bit ago, and I really enjoyed it. I thought the Godzilla moments were fantastic. I thought the political satire aspect of it was pretty cool too, but it's probably one of the most terrifying portrayals of Godzilla in the way how he looks. He has this really cool touch of red in his design. Probably my favorite design of Godzilla ever, if we're gonna be honest. So yeah, this one was awesome. I really loved it. Definitely one of the best Godzilla movies. Next up, we have Kong Skull Island, and I actually did watch this movie in theaters when it released, and I loved it. I'm putting that in S tier. Honestly, when I first watched it, I was debating if I liked it more than Godzilla 2014, but I feel like I don't. I feel like Godzilla 2014 has a small leg up over it, but this one's awesome. I love the Cold War setting. I love the cinematography. It's actually such a fantastic looking movie. Yeah, maybe some of the characters were a bit iffy, but the cast is fantastic. Most of the cast does a great job. You have Brie Larson there, you have Tom Hiddleston, a bunch of others that just do a great job in their roles. And I remember when I first watched it, I actually like was surprised that it wasn't a remake of, you know, the original story. Like, it's not the same story. And I actually am glad it isn't, because if it was, I would kind of feel like, what's the point? You know, we just had Peter Jackson's King Kong in 2005 that did the story perfectly. So why redo that story? You don't have to. But they do something completely different here. So that's cool. And like I said, it made for a fantastic movie. And again, another part of the MonsterVerse that I think really worked for me. So next up, we have these 3 Godzilla animes on Netflix. And I watched these, they're animes. I wasn't too sure about them, but I was excited for them nonetheless. And unfortunately, they turned out to be kind of poop. The first one, though, I'm going to put in D tier. I think this one definitely was the best of all 3 of them. It's got a really interesting premise, to be honest. It's actually really cool. So basically, the whole idea of this is that it's way into the future where humans left Earth because it was taken over by Godzilla and a bunch of other monsters, right? And they essentially decide to come back because they realize we need to take back Earth. We need to. So they go back and try to take it back, try to take down Godzilla. Really awesome concept, amazing concept. It's executed terribly though. It's just not that well made in a lot of aspects. The story is really bland with, you know, what it does with the story. And it does not get any better in the sequels, I will say. So the second one, Godzilla, well, the first one's called Godzilla Planet of the Monsters. The second one's called Godzilla City on the Edge of Battle. Same problems as the first one, but it's even more boring. So I'm going to put the second one probably below Godzilla vs. Megalon. I'll put it above Son of Godzilla, though. I think at least, like I said, there's some elements that are a little bit better. But honestly, Godzilla the Planet Eater, the third one, which I was hoping this one was going to be good, it's an F tier. This shit was trash, man. Just straight trash all around. Majority of the movie takes place in a cave, in a fucking cave. It's a Godzilla movie. Come on, get out there and do some stuff. They even brought in King Ghidorah, but they don't really do enough with it. So I don't know, kind of disappointed in those movies. I was expecting a little more out of them, but didn't really get what I wanted. So next up, we have Godzilla King of the Monsters from 2019. And I actually, when I first watched it, said it was better than the 2014 Godzilla, but I think over time I've decided that no, I actually prefer Godzilla 2014, but this is still a banger movie. I'm putting it at the top of A tier, even above the original Godzilla. That is right. Some people might disagree on that, but I'm doing it. This movie definitely is better in terms of the monster action. It is so great with that, but the story and the characters aren't as good. So to me, that really just depends on what type of person you are. Are you watching Godzilla purely for the Godzilla monster action, or are you watching it for the story and the characters? I'm watching it for both, but I just think the characters are a lot better in the first one and the story's a lot better. And I felt like the monster stuff was fine. Like, I didn't think it was bad or anything like that. There wasn't much fighting in it, but I didn't think I needed that. Whereas this one, I felt like the characters and story just wasn't as good. It was fine. It wasn't bad. It wasn't as good. But the monster action stuff, although it was all during night scenes and kind of hard to see sometimes, it was still fantastic. You had so many characters here, or so many creatures, monsters, whatever you want to call them. Obviously, Godzilla, Mothra was there, King Ghidorah, and Rodan. So I loved seeing all of them. It was cool to see them back, and I mean, cool to see them in the MonsterVerse, you know, for starters. So that was really fun. And the soundtrack by Bear McCreary here is so good. They bring back the original Godzilla theme here too, which just was so perfect. They didn't have that in the 2014 Godzilla, but I'm glad they did in the 2019 one. Fantastic stuff. So now Godzilla vs. Kong from 2021. I'm going to put this in A tier as well, but right above Godzilla King of the Monsters. I actually do prefer Godzilla vs. Kong. Doesn't quite get into the S tier, again, probably because of some of the characters and stuff like that, but I loved this movie just from the monster fighting. I mean, Godzilla and Kong going at it was fucking awesome, especially in Tokyo. I mean, the stuff in the water was cool too. I thought all those scenes were fantastic. But the best part of the movie is when goddamn Mechagodzilla shows up and just blows my goddamn mind just how cool that shit was. Easily my favorite movie with Mechagodzilla. The coolest looking, what is the coolest looking Mechagodzilla? I don't know, just based on the advanced technology of these movies in terms of the CGI just looking fantastic. I mean, some of the best CGI I've seen in movies, in my opinion. Yeah, so when you're just seeing Mechagodzilla go at it here, it's so cool. The colors of this movie are fantastic too, and I don't know, just a lot more lore building, lore exploring in this movie that, for me, really worked. And next, of course, we have Godzilla -1, which is definitely the best Godzilla movie of all time. That was one of the best movies of last year, easily. But yeah, the movie itself, it's the best Godzilla movie. It's not better than King Kong, though, from 2005. No. It's not better than that, but it's pretty close. It's a fucking amazing story. And the thing is this is such a great Godzilla film, and it doesn't even have much Godzilla in it when you really think about it. It's really focused on the characters and the story and the themes, but it's such well-written stuff that you can't not put it in S tier. It's easily got the most emotion out of any Godzilla film, easily. I mean, it made me cry. Not many movies make me damn cry, so when I did, I was like, damn, dude, a Godzilla movie made me cry? That's surprising. And yeah, that means you did a good job with your story if you're able to make someone cry. The focus on the aftermath of World War II was a really good focus for them to do, because usually the movies don't focus on that. I mean, obviously the original did, but a lot of them don't really focus on that anymore. And I liked that it took place right after World War II. And the whole idea of it is that Japan already got hit really badly with the atomic bombs, but now Godzilla just hit them even worse, which is why the title is Godzilla -1. And I like to focus on the Japanese kamikaze pilots and like what that like how that affects people, how that affects them when they feel like they haven't done their honor to go through with being the kamikaze pilot, and how that plays into the story, and people thinking it's obviously not a good thing because they're not valuing human life, and that eventually they do value human life, and it's just such a beautiful story. So you could take out Godzilla and replace it with anything and it would still be just as beautiful. It's one of those movies, man. It's not about Godzilla really, but Godzilla stuff's still cool though regardless. So gotta say it's one of the best on this list for sure. And then lastly, we have Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire. Now I'm gonna put this in B tier, right below Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. I was really disappointed with this movie. If you watched my review, you would have seen me talk quite negatively about it, but I still thought it was a good movie. I still thought it was fine, hence why it's getting the B tier. But it's just like, compared to the rest of the MonsterVerse, I mean, the rest of the MonsterVerse is an A or S. Like the MonsterVerse has been fantastic. So I was very disappointed with it. I felt like the story just didn't work much at all, even though I feel like it did in the other ones to a much larger degree. But I did think the fighting was great here. I thought everything with the Scar King was really cool. I thought a couple of the characters and a couple of story, subplots were good. But overall, I think the dialogue was just too exposition heavy. There was a lot of forced humor that didn't work. At least the humor in the other ones worked. This one, it just felt like out of place. So it was a weird movie for me, because I feel like a lot of it was really, really great, especially the last like 20-30 minutes. But a lot of it also just, I don't know, it felt like too sloppy for me. So that is gonna do it for my Godzilla and King Kong ranking. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section down below. Do you agree? Do you disagree with this list? I know it's gonna be unpopular. I am a casual Godzilla viewer, and I would love to check out the other Godzilla and Kong movies that I did not get a chance to view. Like I said, there was only 5 of them, not that many movies there, but we will check them out someday. Maybe I'll update in the comments of this video to let you guys know how I feel about these movies and where I'll put them whenever I do get around to watching them, if I can find a way to do it, because like I said, they're just not available. I can't find them, so had to skip them, unfortunately. But what do you guys think about this? Does it look good? I think it's a pretty even list. Majority of them are in C tier, and then it kind of expands out into the other tiers, which I think C tier to me is like average movies basically. So I think that works. Obviously, the MonsterVerse is rated a lot higher than some of the other ones, and obviously you have the originals there too. I feel like it's like the originals are a lot higher, and then the MonsterVerse is a lot higher, but the ones in the middle are like kind of all mixed in, you know what I mean? So I don't know. Let me know your guys' thoughts. Peace out, everyone.